Well, hey everyone, Daniel Decker here with Positive University, and I am privileged to welcome Bob Burg here today. Bob is a prolific author, writer, speaker, all the above, and just a phenomenal guy. If you don't know him personally, I've had the opportunity to get to know him for the last few years, and he's just one of those guys that just makes the world better. So Bob, thank you for joining us today and spending some time with me.
What a nice compliment. Thank you, Daniel. I feel the same way about you.
Well, thank you. So today we're going to talk about influence, what it is, just how you leverage it and use it to make a greater impact, and even how you can use its benefits to deal with the people who maybe you don't agree with or you can't agree to disagree. So before we dive into that, I thought it'd be good to give people a little context of kind of who you are, maybe some background if they don't know who you are. But so you've written a number of books, many best-selling books. How many have you written so far?
Well, I think the number of books is either 11 or 12. Not all of them have been bestsellers. Not all of them have sold well. A few have sold really well, others not so much.
Yeah. So what's maybe one or two of your favorites?
Well, my favorite of all is one called Adversaries into Allies. And that was really the how-to aspect of the newest book. But that's probably my favorite because I really believe it's my life's work. The other favorite would have to be The Go-Giver, which is John David Mann's and my business parable that kind of started the whole series. And, that one sold over 700,000 copies and is still going strong. And that's just been it's been like a child to me. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. So how many books are into the Go-Giver series now?
This is our fourth one, and it's the third parable because the second book was more of an application of the Go-Giver. So we had the Go-Giver, Go-Givers Sell More, which is the application based, then the Go-Giver Leader, which was a parable, and now this one, the Go-Giver Influencer, another parable set in the same fictional city.
I love it. Yeah, the Go-Giver, I mean, that was a game changer book for a lot of people. I know, so many of my friends have read it. It's just really a great piece of work. So, thank you for that gift to us.
Wow.
So now, you're moving into influence, which, how do you define influence? I mean, where are we going with influence today? Yeah,
and that's a great question because I think it always is important to define terms, especially these days when there are so many terms that are used that, can really have different definitions to different people or have sort of taken on a life of their own. So I think on a very, very basic level, Daniel, influence can be defined as the ability to move a person or persons to a desired action, usually within the context of a specific goal. That's the definition, but I don't in any way believe that is the substance or the essence of influence. I believe the essence of influence is pull as opposed to push, as in how far can you push a rope? And of course, the answer, not very far, or at least not very fast or very effectively. And that's why great influencers don't push. You never hear people say, wow, that Dave or that Mary, she is so influential. She has a lot of push with people. She sure is pushy. I mean, it's just great. No, she has a lot. She's influential. She has a lot of pull. That's what influence is. It's an attraction. Great influencers attract people first to themselves and only then to their ideas.
So the new book, and the title, I'm going to read it so I don't butcher it here. The Go-Giver Influencer, a little story about the most persuasive idea. So why now? I mean, what was your motivation for this book now?
Well, I think influence is always important. The ability to be able to move people to accept your ideas. I mean, anything that's come along that's improved human life through the free market system has always had to be, people have had to be persuaded or influenced to buy into that idea. It's like any philosophy, any product, any service, any idea, any what have you. So influence has always been a part of our series. This is the first time we're actually doing the book about influence itself. And I think today's times have made it even more important because as we see so often, whether it's in person, whether it's in conversation, whether it is on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, we see people who they have a certain point of view, a certain side, a certain And what they're doing is they are yelling at others, even online. They are yelling at others. They are insulting each other with vitriol, with hatred. What they're not doing is persuading. Because you don't hear people. I mean, think about it. If you've seen this on Twitter and Facebook, where someone makes a point and then someone responds or comments and says, people like you are the worst disgraceful human beings. Are you trying to ruin this country? Blah, blah, blah. Now, does the person getting this comment, do they ever respond to that by writing in, oh, thank you. I hadn't thought about that before. You just opened my eyes. Thank you for pointing out the error of my ways. I now renounce all my beliefs and I'm taking your side. No, that doesn't happen at all. It just keeps people more determined to hold their position. It creates no type of dialogue and no type of change. And I think if there's one thing right now we really need is to be able to communicate with others so that we can open minds and open hearts, and we don't get there by insulting others.
Man, there has never been a more timely need for something like that than now. It's funny because just last night at the time of us recording this, I posted something on Facebook and just about, the climate that we're in and some of the things that are going on, and tried to do it very tactfully, but even prefaced it with it's okay if you disagree with me, if you want to comment. And I mean, 4 seconds later, it was like, bam, bam, bam. And I'm just amazed at some of my friends even that were like, guys, this is not how you get someone to think like you. You just
great point, Daniel. Exactly. That is not how what you just said is perfect. This is not how you get someone to think like you, or to even be open to your ideas, or to open to dialogue. But here's the thing, and this is so important. Because someone say, well, yeah, Daniel or Bob, that's fine. But let's face it, you're never going to get this. But, some people, they're so to one side or the other. My mind's made up. Don't confuse me with the facts. And we know that. And so you're never going to get those people to change. But that's okay, because here's what's happening. When you are having one of these discussions online, let's say in person, but just in this vernacular online, sure, this person may not ever change, but there are a lot of people who are observing this conversation. In internet terms, they are lurking, right? They are observing, they're watching, and here's what they're looking to see. First, who makes the most cogent points? And who does it in such a way that they are more likable, that you will allow yourself to be influenced by? Because remember, for everyone who's either on the far left or the far right or the far this way or the far that way, most people are somewhere in the middle or slightly to one side, and they can be influenced. But they're going to go with the people they begin to know, like, and trust. And that does not happen through hearing someone spewing invectives at others and doing it unthinkingly.
Absolutely. I totally agree. So influence, I mean, sometimes, and you use the word persuasion or persuasive, sometimes people, I think, mistake influence for manipulation, or some are writing books, and it's really manipulation. How do you define, what's the difference for you?
Yeah, well, again, if influence itself is simply the ability to move people to a desired action, it can be done two ways. One is absolutely through manipulation, which is a type of coercement, or it could be fraud, or it could be any of the other nasty ways of doing things. And then there's persuasion, which is totally win-win in nature. And I would even go so, because remember, influence itself is a principle, like gravity. It works. It's not good or bad. It's good when it keeps you from drifting up aimlessly into space. It's bad when walking off a 7-story building. So it's the same with influence. It can be for good or evil. It can be a blessing or a curse. It depends how you use it. I would say that persuasion and manipulation are even cousins, but one's the good cousin and one's the evil cousin. There was a book back in 1987 called The Art of Talking So That People Will Listen. It was actually more about listening than talking. Great book by Paul W. Sweats, who's a great guy. And I thought he gave the best explanation of the difference between persuasion and manipulation. And I want to credit him because I just thought it was so fantastic. He wrote, manipulation aims at control, not cooperation. It does not consider the good of the other party. It results in a win-lose situation. In direct contrast to the manipulator, the persuader always seeks to enhance the self-esteem or situation of the other party. The result is that people respond positively because they're treated as responsible, self-directing individuals. You know, Daniel, a manipulator doesn't necessarily want to hurt the other party, but if that's what it takes to get what they want, they will do so. They are totally I-focused. It's all about them. A manipulator, that will never, a persuader, that will never happen, because in order for a persuader to feel good about themselves, they have to know that the other person came out ahead, that the other person feels good about themselves, about the situation. And so, we like to say a manipulator can have employees, but rarely a team. A manipulator can make the sale, but rarely have returning customers or customers that are loyal, and certainly not referral sources. And hey, a manipulator can still have a family they love and who loves them, but rarely is it an effective type of happy family. So, while manipulation can sometimes get you the results you want in the short term, but typically not the long term. It's not sustainable. Persuasion can get you the results both in the short term and the long term. So not only is it the more righteous way to be, it also happens to be the more productive way to be.
That's a great litmus test in a way of something you said there about how you feel afterwards, of whether you were empowering the other person or doing something of benefit to the other person or just for yourself.
Yeah, and that's also why, in terms of making sure you're not manipulated by someone else, okay, just as we shouldn't do it to someone else, we shouldn't allow that to happen to us. A manipulator will kind of utilize tactics, if you will, to exploit your negative feelings. So they will try to make you feel naive or stupid, right, or guilty if you don't comply with what. So if you feel yourself having those feelings, okay, you simply ask yourself, why am I feeling this way?
Yeah.
And, if I had the choice not to do this thing, would I not? And the fact is you do have the choice, and we can talk, about how to respond tactfully in order to not do the thing later, and that's fine. But you don't need to be manipulated by anyone else either.
Well, I know in the book you've got you talk about the 5 secrets of genuine influence, which was pretty, I love that when I read it. So can you share, can elaborate on those 5 secrets?
Sure. Well, the first one is master your emotions. So even though when we persuade and we influence, it's all about the other person. It's discovering what they want, what they need, what they desire, and helping them to get it. That's what really righteous, genuine influence is, okay? So it's about them, but it begins with ourselves. We've got to master our own emotions. The sages of the Talmud asked, who is mighty? And they answered, that person who can control their own emotions and make of an enemy or of a potential enemy a friend. Well, this is where it all begins, because it's only when we're in control of our emotions and control of ourselves that we're even in a position to take a potentially negative situation or person and turn it into a win for everyone involved. On the other hand, when we allow ourselves, based on what someone else says or does, that pushes our emotional buttons, right? We allow ourselves to become frustrated or upset or angry, which is the big thing, right? Well, now not only are we not part of the solution, we're just as much a part of the problem, if not more so than they are. Now, we all know this, and yet, how often do we allow ourselves to allow our emotions to take over?
Got a little like respond versus react as well.
Yeah, well, this is what we need to be able to do. And Zig Ziglar, I first learned that from Zig probably 40 years ago, listening to one of his tapes. That's how long ago this was. Not even a CD, right?
Wow.
A tape. Right? One step above an 8-track, right? A cassette tape. And he talked about, the difference between responding and reacting. They sound alike, but their world's different. When we respond, we're in control of ourselves and we're able to have a more positive outcome. When we react, we're allowing someone else to, So we say, well, why does this happen that we come? And the answer is we're human beings. And as human beings, we are emotional creatures. I mean, we'd like to think we're rational and logical. And to a certain extent, of course, we are. But we're pretty emotion driven. We make major decisions based on emotion, and we back up those decisions with logic, or we rationalize, which if you break up the word rationalize, it simply means we tell ourselves rational lies. And so the key is not to deny our emotions. That actually wouldn't be logical, right? Not deny our emotions or forgo our emotions. Emotions are a wonderful part of life. They bring us joy. They make life worthwhile. No, it's just to be sure that we're mastering our emotions as opposed to they mastering us. Or as one of my wonderful friends and mentors, Dondi Scumaci, puts it, by all means, take your emotions along for the ride, but make sure you are driving the car. So when we're able to master our own emotions and help other people work effectively within theirs, now our influence is about to skyrocket. And that's law number one.
What's two?
Well, law number two is to step into the other person's shoes, which sounds pretty easy until you realize that most of us have different size feet. And we can't always just step into their shoes. We have to really work at doing this. We all come from different belief systems, different ways of seeing the world. I define a belief as a subjective truth. It's the truth as we understand the truth to be, which means it may be the truth or it may just be our truth, right? But we all operate based on a belief system, which is a combination of upbringing, environment, schooling, news media, television shows, movies, popular culture, cultural mores. But, by the time we're a little more than toddlers, our beliefs are pretty much set in stone. We had nothing to do really with bringing those beliefs into our consciousness, but there they are. And most of us grow up living our entire lives subject to what I call an unconscious operating system. We don't realize we have it. And others have that same thing. They have their own, but we don't. But as human beings, we tend to think that most people see the world basically the way we do. And it's not necessarily true. This is why you will hear people say things like, oh, everybody likes that.
Right.
Or nobody would want that, or right? And so we simply need to, in order to understand or step into their shoes, we need to ask questions, and we need to not be afraid of asking questions and then listening. And as one of the mentors, because in this story there's two mentors, two proteges. As one of the mentors, Coach George, told Jillian, his protege, don't just listen with your ears. Don't just listen, but listen with the back of your neck. And this is something John came up with, John David Mann, my awesome co-author. And he got that from when he was in martial arts when he was just a little kid. In the sense, I used to talk about listening with the back of your neck. And what that meant is that it's your entire being, right? And try it sometimes. And try it first with people who you know and you trust and who love you, and because it's a little bit of a different feeling. But you're actually not just hearing, you're not just listening, you're putting your entire being, feel it. Feel you're listening with the back of your neck, and watch how much more you understand and how much this person feels good about you, because they know you're listening. And when we do this, and again, it's not that we have to understand their belief system. We can't. I mean, they don't even understand their belief system. It's just understanding that there is a clash of belief systems, and that so long as we operate within that context and we do it with respect and we do it with kindness, now we're able to create that winning situation for all.
I love it. That's great. Isn't that sad, Bob? It's such a skill. It's so simple. It's free, and it's available to everyone. Just listening and being a good listener and being able to. I mean, that's such a big issue with communication now, is that people just, they're distracted. They're not paying attention to the person in front of them.
That's so very true. I mean, if there was always an attention issue, which there probably always was, it's multiple. It's on steroids now by this time, right? And so, sure. So when we can do that, when we can ask questions, genuinely listen, it goes a long way. Now, this brings up the third law. This is to set the frame. And I can't stress the importance of this. When you set a proper frame, you are 90% of the way there to influencing and persuading. What is a frame? Well, a frame is the foundation from which everything else ensues or takes place. Let me give you an example, if I may, from what I thought was the best example of setting a frame I've ever seen. I was sitting in a Dunkin' Donuts restaurant. And anyone who knows me knows I'm often sitting in Dunkin' Donuts restaurants and drinking coffee and reading. And there was a little boy about probably 2 years old, 2.5, 3, little toddler. And he was running around the restaurant, and his parents called him back over to the table. Well, he starts walking over, and suddenly he takes a spill on the floor. He slips. Now, he didn't hurt himself, you could tell, but you could also tell he was shocked. He did not expect that. So what does he do? Well, he immediately looks at the two people in the world he trusts most, his mom and dad, and he's looking at them for their interpretation of the event. What happened. He wants to know what happens next. Yeah. Now, I truly believe, Daniel, that had the parents gotten upset and run over and been scared, oh no, are you okay? I think he would have started crying. But they handled it just beautifully. They walked over, they had big smiles on their face, they applauded, they laughed, they said, oh, what a good trick, that looks like so much fun. And immediately he began to laugh. Well, what the parents did is they set a positive frame from which he could operate. And we can do that with anyone we meet in any situation. It can be as simple as a genuine inside-out smile or the way we greet someone. But the question is, what do we do when someone else comes to the situation with an already negative frame? Now what we need to do is reset it, which one of the mentors, Judge Celia Henshaw, this is what she did with Jackson. And so let's take an example, if we may. You need to see the supervisor about an issue because the person at the front line wasn't able to handle it. They weren't equipped to or didn't have the authority to, what have you. And so they go back to get the manager. The manager's name, you find out, is Mr. Jones. So he goes back and tells Mr. Jones there's a customer that needs to see him. Now, let's step into Mr. Jones's shoes for a moment. He probably, gets these kind of situations 10 times a day. Maybe he doesn't like his job. Mr. Jones perhaps is, and we don't know this for sure, but we just, we know what could be happening, a bunch of different things. We're going to be prepared. But Mr. Jones is ready to go out there, and he knows he has to be polite, but he's ready to quote the rule book. After all, he deals with people like this 10 times a day. And he knows when he goes out there, the person's going to say, Mr. Jones, we need to blah, blah, blah. He's going to say, well, the rule's saying, no, I don't care about the right. And that's how it happens. Yep. But he comes out and he sees something totally different. He sees us. We have a smile on our face. We walk toward him, hand extended, and we'll use my name since I'm in the example. And I would say, hi, Mr. Jones, Bob Burg. Thank you so much for taking a moment out of your time to see me. I know you're very busy. Boom. We have just now reframed this from two adversaries, right, to two allies, two friends just looking for a common resolution to this. We have become that person who Mr. Jones wants to please. And we see this happening at airports all the time, right? When the gate agent has been taking abuse by people and for nothing that's their own, and then someone comes up and has a big smile on their face, says, wow, it looks like you've been put through the ringer here. I'm so sorry you've had to go through this. Boom. Now you are the person. And again, this needs to be genuine. This needs to be authentic, not as a way to manipulate.
The key here is that you took a moment to consider the other person before you were just worried about yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So setting the frame, it's interesting, Daniel, in the military classic, The Art of War, Sun Tzu wrote, the ultimate in knowledge and skill is to make conflict altogether unnecessary. That's what I think of when we talk about setting a frame or resetting a frame. When you do it correctly, you're making conflict unnecessary. Why have it necessary if we don't have to?
Yeah, diffuse it immediately.
Absolutely.
So that was 3.
Yep. Well, number 4 is to communicate with tact and empathy. So you can have the other three. You can master your emotions, and you can step into the other person's shoes. You can set the frame. Tact and empathy allows you to communicate. Well, let's put it this way. My dad has always defined tact as the language of strength. Mm-hmm. To me, tact is what allows us to correct or critique, or dare I say, constructively criticize. So not that we ever want to do that, but we're talking about the real world, not a fantasy world. And there's times we need to be able to help a person see or do things in a different way. Well, tact is what allows you to do so in such a way that not only does this person not feel defensive toward you and resistant to your ideas, but they feel open to you and potentially receptive to your ideas. That's what tact really allows. Empathy is the identification with or vicarious experiencing of another person's feelings. Now, this is different from just stepping into the other person's shoes, which is a little more logical in nature, right? This is more of a resonance with the other person. But I think something that we need to know about empathy is that communicating empathy doesn't mean you necessarily understand how they feel. The fact is, you might not. We can't necessarily understand we might not have any idea how they feel. I think empathy is communicating to that person by maybe what you say, how you say it, or just who you are. You're communicating that you understand they're feeling something, and that this something is distressful to them, and that you're there to help to the best of your ability.
It's super powerful, especially right now, Bob. I mean, because in the conversation I had last night, one of the people said, and I won't explain, what the topic was, but they were like, you would have no idea. You didn't experience that. You have no idea. And my response to them was, I don't have to have experienced it fully to have empathy towards it. And I want to understand. And I think that's what some of the discourse that's so wrong with communication right now. It's like one side wants to say, oh, you're not like me and you'll never understand what it's like to be me. And then the other side, either bows up or just, doesn't communicate it back, that they're articulating that they actually want to understand.
Exactly. So here's one thing which we can do if you'd like before we move on to the fifth one. One way to sort of be able to tactfully approach one of these online kind of insults when people do those things. Someone says, and let's say we're talking about something like universal or socialized medicine, okay? Mm-hmm. And somebody goes on there and they're all for it. Somebody else is against it, and this person who is for socialized medicine says, I can't believe you people, you're wanting people to die on the street. We've seen these kind of things, right? You don't care about other human beings, blah, 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 blah. Okay, they do that. So here's a response. And I know this can be tough because you want to tell this person off. But again, we know that's not going to do. So what you do is this. You say, Dave or Mary, first, please know I appreciate your passion and your desire to help others. Okay. Now here's the phrasing that comes after that. Like you, I want to live in a country where everyone has access to high quality, inexpensive health care. I think our biggest disagreement is only in the way that we would pursue that happening.
Brilliant.
Boom. Okay. And so when you do that, now remember, this person, and by the way, I have had people write back and apologize for what they've said. So please don't think it can't be done. But usually they won't. Usually they're right. That's not going to happen. But here's who this does matter to. Those other people who are watching the conversation, who are either in the middle or a little bit to the left or right, but they're open to cogent explanations by people who seem to have their head together, not just hurling invectives at people.
Now, Bob, break that just from a practical standpoint. Break that response down a little bit. So that was definitely reframing in that. But what's the structure?
Okay.
Structure.
Well, okay, so first it was controlling our own emotions because we're all human and we can't believe that someone who believes in socialized medicine, even though we know that they have good intent, but we also know that good intent plus negative results does not equal positive results. Okay, so in our mind, first, we disagree with them. I'm not saying the listener does, I'm just saying in this case. But we also kind of emotionally, we've been insulted. This person's saying you don't care about other human beings that you want, right? So, but we're controlling our emotions. We're not letting them control. We're not denying the feeling, but we're not letting them control us, okay? So now what we're going to do is we're going to step into the other person's shoes. This person does care about people. The chances are good that this person has a good heart and that they do care about people, okay? Then what we want to do is reset the frame. And we're going to do that by first, thanking them for their passion, or that we admire your passion. I can tell you, you really care about people and you want to see people healthy and so forth. And then, so we've reframed that, okay? But now we really do the reframe, okay? And that is to say, like you, I also want to live in a country where everyone, and we could say, adult and child, has access to high quality, inexpensive health care. I think our biggest difference is simply in the way that we would pursue that taking place.
So now, like you is a key.
Exactly. Yeah. And then now, of course, if then someone else might say, well, how would you do that? Okay. Now you have to have your facts, because obviously, all the tact and kindness and reframing and everything in the world without knowing what we're talking about doesn't scale. But, assuming that, how, now, so, and that's basically how you do it. And you have to stay very patient with people. And sometimes you have to answer the same question 5 different times, but without making people feel like you've asked me the same question 5 different, because again, if you make them feel badly about themselves and feel defensive, they're going to go right back into their confirmation bias and totally just disavow whatever whatever's different.
So this framework, it applies not just to social influence, but into the workplace.
Oh, absolutely. Sure.
Everything.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And we try to do that in our stories because we really believe that, any principles they work across the board. They work in terms of, success when we're talking financial, physical, spiritual, mental, emotional, social, relational, what have you. And that's why we always try to include something in the story that's personal as well as just business.
That's excellent. So what's 5?
Well, law number 5, and this is, in John's and my stories, we typically have the first 4 laws, and then the 5th law is always something really counterintuitive that doesn't seem as though it would fit and needs to go a little deeper before. We call it the 4 fingers and a thumb, and it sort of ends up being what actually brings it all together. And law number 5 is to let go of the need to be right. Now, that's not to say you don't want to be right, or or that you don't prefer to be right, or that you don't do everything you possibly can to have your point go in such a way that it's influential and persuasive and so forth. It's just losing the attachment to having to be right. And this is actually quite practical, and paradoxically, it will make you more influential. Why? Well, for 2 reasons. One is when you let go of the need to have to be right, you go into learning mode. Right? And we know that this way, rather than be stuck in our own confirmation bias, we ask questions. We ask questions not only to the other person, but we ask about the whole thing. We look at our own. Why do we know? Why do we think this is true? Where did we learn this? Who did the person we learned it from learn it from? How does that person know this? Why do they say? And what that does, it actually equips us to know more about the topic. This is why I also tell people, and I wrote about this in a blog post recently, watch and listen to those who disagree with you or who you disagree with. For example, if you're a conservative who watches Fox, watch MSNBC sometimes. If you're a progressive, watch Fox sometimes. But here's the thing. Don't watch them just to sneer at them and talk about why they're wrong. And I'm not saying you have to agree with them either, but just understand their viewpoint. understand why they think like they think or why they feel like they feel. So what that's going to do is it's going to equip, unless you can explain, I've heard this from many others, it's not an original, but unless you can explain something or argue from the other person's point of view, you really don't understand the topic totally. Okay. Again, this doesn't mean you have to agree. It means you understand. But the other thing that letting go of this need to be right does is it opens that other person up, because they can tell that they are discussing this issue with someone who's seeking truth, not just to be right at any cost. And, I think in a sense, it brings up a point, because people will often ask, well, sure, you're being nice and everything like that, but doesn't that mean you have to give in and stuff? No, absolutely not. Tact should never be confused with compromise. We can always speak tactfully and respectfully to others while maintaining our values.
Yeah, so I was reading that, and I didn't read everything fully, so I was curious about that. So influence in this context with you isn't just about compromise, because people, I think, misunderstand that a lot.
I think you make a great point. I think they do. Compromise, and one of the mentors, George, told Jillian, jokingly, he said, compromise comes from the Greek word for nobody actually gets what they want. Okay. And it might as well mean that, because when you think about it, compromise, now, by the way, there's a time and place for everything, of course, but we're talking about a certain context. Compromise by its very nature is lose-lose. It means both parties are giving up something in order to please, or in order to have it come to a, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. What we'd rather do is, rather than go for compromise, rather than have that as your first option, let's aim for collaboration. Collaboration by its very nature is win-win. It's 1 + 1 = 3. Collaboration is actually what the free market system is all about, right? Both parties willingly exchanging with others because they both believe they'll be better off as a result. Okay. So we like collaboration as opposed to compromise, although in the proper time and place, compromise, of course, is necessary, but it's usually not.
Yeah, no, it's great. So Bob, with this book, and what you and John are trying to do, with it, what is your biggest hope from a takeaway standpoint? And then before we'll kind of, every positive you interview, we like to kind of close with the Triple H, the hero, hardship, and highlight. So I'll get into that with you. But before we do, I just want to know, so what's your outcome? What do you hope people are going to take away most from this?
I would like to see us make some sort of dent in the way people communicate with each other. I'd really like this to catch on and have people understanding, again, that you don't have to agree with other people in order to treat them as human beings, in order to create a bigger pie, in order to create dialogue where something can actually, where discussion can happen in a way that's constructive. And I think when we do that, we really open up worlds, not just for others, we open up worlds for ourselves. We become that influential person. We become that person who, let's face it, really is able to accomplish some stratospheric, some enormous type of success, because we become really experts at helping other people get what they want. Yeah.
There's so much value in this. And so, from every application of life, from parenting to business to, I love this book. I love the concept. I love what you guys are doing with it. So it's out now, or when's it coming out?
April 10th.
April 10th. So, and it'll be everywhere books are sold, Amazon, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So, and at thegogiver.com, they can get the first 2 chapters if they like to see where the story's going. Then they can always click through if they like.
Absolutely. That's great. All right. So here's the wraparound for the positive view. So it's Triple H, hero, hardship, and highlight. So who is a hero of yours? It can be present or past.
Can it be my daddy?
Sure.
My dad. And actually, I'd say as a unit, both my mom and dad. I was very blessed to have great parents who absolutely embodied what I would call go-givers. Okay. Dad, I'm like Dad in that we're both more public people who are out there, and Dad was just, to me, the greatest when it came to people skills. And I have a saying that it's not what what I learned from Dad telling me, but just watching him. And that is the single greatest people skill is a highly developed and authentic interest in the other person. I modeled that from watching Dad with people, and it didn't matter who they were. And he had such genuine attention and to want to make them feel genuinely good about themselves. Really, I feel like I'm carrying on, hopefully, Dad's legacy through my work. So, but wonderful parents, they are both my heroes.
I love that. That's a good reminder too. As a guy who's a father of 4, that how much they learn from seeing, not just what we tell them. Yeah. So, all right. So the next one will go into hardship. So what is a hardship or a defining moment that has helped you become who you are today?
On a macro level, it was growing up with and having obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, the real kind, not the kind where people say, oh, I'm so OCD about this. No, I had the real issue and still have had to live with it. It's been quite a journey. And I've spoken about that at certain times and done interviews on it. But that's been a tough row to hoe. But it has also, hopefully made me a more empathetic person and being able to understand others who have issues. So I'd say that's been my biggest hurdle.
That's good to know. I didn't know that. So from a highlight standpoint, what are you most excited about right now? I mean, not just book related or whatever, but what's going on in your life right now that you're excited about?
Well, my business partner, Kathy Tajanel, who's just brilliant and fantastic. And we've put together, a whole thing of, go give her speakers and courses and different things. And she's the brains. I mean, she really runs this, and I'm just excited about it. And, yes, excited about the book, but the whole thing, it's great to do something that you're really excited about, so that's kind of in my life right now, that's pretty much the dominant thought. And it's,
How did you, I meant to ask you that in the beginning. So when did you, or I assume you had a job at some point, when did you make that transition, or how did you make the transition into becoming a writer and a speaker?
Yeah, I actually started as a broadcaster, first in radio and then on television. I was the late night news guy for a very, very small ABC affiliate in the Midwest. Was not very good at it. And it wasn't long before I graduated into sales. And I knew nothing about sales, and the training where I first worked was, we'll say, negligible at best. So I floundered for the first few months. But then eventually I came across books in a book. This is 40 years ago. This is back when bookstores were pretty much known for selling books, right? Yeah. As opposed to coffee and pastry and everything else. I came across 2 books. One was by Tom Hopkins and the other by Zig Ziglar. And I began studying their information. And really, in just a few weeks, my sales began to go through the roof. And I realized that it was really a matter of having a methodology, having a system. And to this day, I define a system as simply the process of predictably achieving a goal based on a logical and specific set of how-to principles. The key being predictability. If it's been proven that by doing A, you'll get the desired result of B, you just have to do A and keep doing A, and eventually you'll get the desired result of B. From there, personal development and reading everything I could. And eventually I worked my way up to sales manager of another company, and people started asking me to share what was working for me. And eventually it kind of morphed into a speaking business. And, it's just been a lot of fun.
You were speaking before you were writing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. In fact, I wrote my first book, Endless Referrals, really simply as a way to position myself better as a speaker. So that was totally utilitarian. Then other books I wrote, it's because I just felt I had a message I wanted to get out. And then, The Go-Giver was sort of a whole different thing in itself. And fortunately, John David Mann, who's the lead writer and storyteller, I'm a how-to guy. John is a great storyteller. So a good collaboration, but he's fantastic. So that's pretty much it.
Well, Bob, it's been so great to spend some time with you today, to get to know you a little bit more and to share these principles with others. So I just thank you for your time and wish you well.
Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate you so much. And I love all of John's books, and just I feel blessed to be friends with both of you. Thank you.
Thank you.